Welcome back to Silver and Black React. I am James Pledger. I am joined by Karl Schoening of San Antonio Sports Star as we get you ready for tonight's game between the San Antonio Spurs and Dallas Mavericks. And before we dive into the Mavericks, Karl, let's take a look at this 4-game sample size that we've been offered by the Spurs. They are 1-3, but by all accounts, most people seem very impressed with the 1-3 due to the teams that they have played. What are your thoughts so far as the Spurs sit 1-3 heading into this game tonight against the Mavericks?
3 moral victories against the Lakers, defending champion Bucks and Nuggets with their reigning MVP. 1 actual victory against the Magic. That was the home and season opener. So if you look at it, the Spurs put themselves into position to win all 3 of their losses against 3 teams that are very good. Obviously, one play goes the other way. Another made free throw here or there against the Lakers team, and the Spurs are sitting at 2-2, possibly 4-0. But that would be too much for the world if they were 4-0. So, yeah, obviously, this is a 1-3 team, but they're better than their record reflects.
What are some things that they actually do need to button up, though, to turn these moral victories into actual victories?
You know, usually when something like this comes around, you would say something along the lines of, like, play a full 48 minutes. It's not that. It probably comes down to overall three-point percentage and just learning how to close out games. This is a young group really getting their first opportunity to step into a closeout situation. There's no more DeMar DeRozan, Rudy Gay, Patty Mills, etc. to sort of be those veteran leaders at the end of the game. Now it comes down to is going to be is going to be DeJounte Murray who steps into DeMar DeRozan's role as the closer, or do they even need a closer? I think that's sort of the question. Does the game change at all when the closing moments, which usually turn into isolation ball, change away from what they've been doing, which is kind of a reversion back to the beautiful game, if you will, where there's just constant ball movement. Feels like they're running the Princeton offense out there with how they just don't stop moving. And you know, that's probably the big question is, can they obviously can play that way for the full 48 minutes, but can they close out games like that, or does something have to change to something a little more simplicity and get the ball in the hands of your best scorer? And the other thing is, I think they're too selfless. They sometimes will pass up the good shot for what they think is the great shot, but it's really sort of an out-of-rhythm shot, even though it might be a better look. For example, against the Lakers, I distinctly remember there was a Derek White moment where he had the ball just outside of the corner, and he kind of had an open 3, but Devin Vassell was wide open from the wing, so he gave him a bit of an awkward bounce pass. And, yeah, you know, if you look at it at its face value, Vassell had the better look, but Derek White should have either driven and then kicked out or taken the shot himself, what have you. It was just a little too selfless. And the same thing happened with Keldon Johnson. There was a play where he was pushing the fast break. Jakob Poeltl was filling the lane correctly, and ideally Keldon takes it right to the rim, but he decided to, reward the big man for running, and he passed it to Jakob. Turned out to be a turnover. So I'd like to see a little bit more selfish play, and that's a good problem to have.
I'm glad you just mentioned the turnover. Turnovers, free throws, both seem to be a little bit of an issue here through the first 4 games of the season.
Free throws for sure. I think they're sitting around 65% from the charity stripe. Yeah, that's obviously something that Pop wants to shore up. But the turnovers, that might be one of those double-edged swords that you have to live with, because if you're moving the ball as much as the Spurs are, that creates more opportunities for turnovers. A typical Greg Popovich coached team is one of the bottom 5 teams in the league in turnovers. However, you're talking about the team that's number 1 in the league in assists right now, and I can see that keeping up all year long the way they're playing. So it's one of those things where you pass more, you create more opportunities to turn it over. But if you look at it, DeJounte Murray actually has the lowest turnover rate in the league among point guards. So it's not necessarily too much of an issue, although it is something that if you're looking at, what's the difference between us winning and losing these 3 games? It's free throws, it's turnovers. And I don't think I can really say it's defense because overall they've been a very solid defensive team. Sure, I know people on the internet are going to point out little clips here and there in those 100 possessions games, but overall, Jakob Poeltl's been just a great anchor and one-on-one defensive player, and you know that DJ, Devin Vassell, and pretty much all the Spurs. I can't really say that there's one guy that it's like, okay, the team's going to key on that guy. Because even Doug McDermott has been a solid defender for the Spurs through these first 4 games, and he's probably the one guy that in the starting lineup that you would say, okay, well, let's go with whoever McDermott's guarding.
And McDermott, an underrated defender when he was initially signed. Everybody looked at him, saw three-point shooting. Finally, we're addressing a need, but also a very good defender throughout his time in the NBA. I'm glad you brought McDermott. As we look at tonight's game against the Dallas Mavericks, there will be no Doug McDermott. He has knee swelling and will be out for all of this 3-game road trip. First time we may possibly see him, at least according to Tom Orsborn of the San Antonio Express-News, would be November 4th when they return home. What does that mean when you're dealing with the Mavericks and Luka Doncic on the road?
In a way, I think it's not too big of a deal. Obviously, McDermott was the key pickup of the offseason for the Spurs, but this is the slot for, I would assume, Devin Vassell to fill in very well. You're talking about three-point shooting and a better defender. So when Devin Vassell comes in and he does this thing, I think he's shooting 45% on 5 3-point attempts per game. Trying to do that math in my head, but he has been the guy that was the lottery pick, only the 3rd lottery pick of all time, if I'm not mistaken, for the Spurs, and he is taking that step forward. Yeah, let's go through them real quick. David Robinson, Tim Duncan, Sean Elliott was 3.
Sean?
Yeah, but he was the 3rd when he was drafted. Or he was the 4th now, I should say. So Vassell was the 4th when the Spurs that's what I was getting at. The Spurs have had 5 overall. It's a rich people problem, obviously. But, Vassell is who I would have slated to kind of be that sort of combo forward.
Not that young in the starting lineup? Just to keep the continuity on the bench, because Devin Vassell and Lonnie Walker have done so well together being that spark for the second unit, the same way Patty Mills was.
As much as I like that idea, Thaddeus just hasn't really broken into the rotation for whatever reason it is, and I would actually be down to see that. However, in this particular case, I see either Lonnie or Devin, and I think just because Vassell has a bit more size on him and they're sort of looking to replace McDermott, who's the forward, I think the nod goes to Vassell.
The one thing that Doug does do better than Vassell and better than anyone on this team is move without the ball. Every step he takes on the court has a purpose and a plan, and there is an intention behind that movement, and I think that's going to be very difficult to replace within the offense.
Absolutely, because the defense has to key on him at all times, communicate through screens and switches and what have you, and he's somebody who's not just a threat from 3, he's a threat for backdoor cuts and those kind of opportunities to score, which isn't to say that Devin Vassell can't do that either. He needs to watch some of that tape and learn from him.
Now, tonight's opponent, the Dallas Mavericks, we know they have Luka Doncic. We know they have Kristaps Porzingis. We know this team is a borderline top 4 or 5 team in the Western Conference for the last 2 years with Doncic. How do the Spurs combat Luka Doncic and try to escape with a win?
It will be interesting to see who they throw out on him. Will it be DeJounte Murray, who obviously gives up some size? Will it be Devin Vassell, who still gives up a little bit of size but matches up with him a little bit better physically? And at the end of the day, you might just let Luka be Luka and try and limit what everybody else does because Porzingis obviously coming in second there, and you just had that point guard forward matchup in Russell Westbrook and Anthony Davis sort of tear you apart because I think they combined they had 35 and 33. I won't do that quick math in my head, but that's what those two guys brought to the table. So obviously, granted it was overtime, the Spurs don't want a repeat of that. And then when it comes down to Tim Hardaway Jr., there's a real cliff of who's the fourth best player on that Mavericks roster.
Norman Powell, Maxi Kleber.
Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't necessarily say that they should be the fourth best player on any team in the NBA. They're nice complementary role players, don't get me wrong.
But Doncic is that good.
Yeah, Doncic is the motor that makes that team run. Jason Kidd is trying to work in the whole roster. So you're going to look at maybe more opportunities for these guys that do sort of need to step up and be better role players, and that's what the Spurs need to limit is Porzingis and down. How do they limit what they do? And you can let Doncic get his 40.
Now, the reason I brought up initially Thad Young was maybe this is a Thad Young game. You keep Devin where he's comfortable on the bench and not breaking up that continuity, because I look at Thad Young, he's a bigger guy, so he can physically handle Doncic, and he's athletic enough to at least keep in front of him, so you insert him into the starting lineup, and maybe there's a possibility to defend him without having to commit the extra help.
Again, it's just one of those things where I don't disagree with your logic. I just don't think that there's been enough proof that Thaddeus would be stepping into the starting lineup out of all the guys off of the bench. That would be a pleasant surprise, not opposed to the game plan.
Because I worry about Devin because he isn't as thick. And Doncic, being a bigger guy, can get him into the low block and do some damage down there as well.
Yeah, I think Doncic has enjoyed his Mexican food here in Texas.
He looks like he's loving his Tex-Mex, right?
Yeah, exactly. So
he's on the Zion plan.
Yeah, and really, that will be the story of the evening: is how do the Spurs go through the start of this road trip that they're expected to not have McDermott and. Obviously, we'll touch on it next topic, but even Josh Primo won't be around. Mm-hmm. So somebody's going to have to fill those starter minutes that are left with no McDermott. And I would assume in this particular case it's Vassell, but I wouldn't be opposed to your logic and insert Thaddeus in there because Vassell and Lonnie have been really good off of the bench for the Spurs as like their two wings. Mm-hmm. And if anybody is sort of not listening to me, but doing what I was asking about, being a little more selfish in the right way, it's Lonnie Walker, because Lonnie is somebody that has actually been sort of on the isolation and drive, as you know that's what he's going to do, or he's going to shoot the three. He still gives out assists, don't get me wrong, but it's more of a draw in the defense assist than it is a rhythm of the offense assist. So Vassell is a big part of that, being the floor spacer on the wing for Lonnie Walker. So I agree with your logic. It would be interesting. I would almost even say Drew Eubanks might be the guy there, because Drew's minutes off of the bench have been inconsistent through these 4 games. He still gets his opportunity, but he is not the guy that's coming off of the bench for the Spurs consistently as we thought he would be.
What are your thoughts on tonight's game? How do you see this playing out?
No moral victory here. It's either a win or a loss. This is a team that you want to be better than. You look at the Nuggets, Bucks, Lakers. Yeah, those are teams that you can more or less put money in Vegas and say they're going to be better than the Spurs. Mavericks are the team that the Spurs want to at least be neck and neck within the standings to try and get perhaps that lock-in of a playoff seed, or you're going to be fighting for them in that play-in 7 through 10. And the Spurs cannot take that right now.
We are on a 3-game road trip, and there will be games over the weekend. So what do you think about the rest of this road trip as we hand it? Because we've got the Mavericks coming up tonight. As we look forward, what are you expecting out of the entirety of this 3-game road trip?
The Spurs got to get it together. This is an opportunity where let me double-check my schedule so I don't tell people wrong and I can get the dates right. But obviously, this is the end of the October schedule where they're going to travel to Milwaukee.
They get the Bucks on Saturday.
That could be another moral victory, if you want to quote, because that's in Milwaukee.
So we're not done with the moral victories.
No, we're not done with the moral victories. But, again, when it comes to the Indiana Pacers, who sit at 1-3, you got to beat them. You
got to make them look like Orlando.
Not like Orlando, but if it's a close game late, you want to win those games. Okay. Otherwise, it is a definitive loss. There are no moral victories when it comes to the Mavericks or the Pacers and so on.
We saw them play extremely well against the Milwaukee Bucks just a few days ago. Saturday night, do you see the same type of effort and still kind of playing them close, just not having enough bullets in the chamber by the end of the game to where that's when they kind of extend the lead as late in the game?
Pfizer Forum's a little bit different than AT&T Center, where they played their first game a few nights ago.
Different.
Yeah, exactly. So I wouldn't be surprised if that is the first definitive loss for the Spurs, but also this is a young team that, again, plays 48 minutes, plays hard, knows how to score. Yeah, they're second in the league in field goal percentage. They're first in the league in assists, and that's always going to be a tough recipe for a team. If they can shore up those free throws, maybe they can win.
But Monday, when we see the Indiana Pacers, though, up in Indiana, that feels like a game that if you're a team that you think they are, and they are battling for a playoff spot, or they are battling for one of those play-in tournaments, that's the team that you feel like you've got to go up there and you've got to handle your business, right?
Absolutely. You need to take care of the Indiana Pacers. They're off to a rough start themselves at 1-3, and that is a team that, again, when you look on the eastern side of it, you want to be just as good as, and that would be a good road victory.
He is Karl Schoening. You can catch him mornings on R&R in the morning. I am James Pledger. This is Silver and Black React right here on San Antonio Sports Star.